What if I told you that the very first member of the D clan were not Nefertari Lily or even Joy Boy? Because deep beneath the waves, in the darkest corner of One Piece lore, there's a name whispered among pirates and feared by legends. And it is Davy Jones. Most fans think of him as a throwaway myth, but he's the guy behind the Davy backfight. But what if Oda didn't just toss that in for fun? What if Davy Jones is the original rebel, the prototype of the Will of D and the man who cursed the seas before Joy Boy ever set foot on the Grand Line? This isn't about an old legend, but uncovering a terrifying truth buried in the Void Century, connecting Emu, Rocks D, Xebec, and even the One Piece itself. Because if Davy Jones is who we think he is, the entire series changes. Before we dive into the wild theories, let's get one thing straight. Davy Jones is canon in the world of One Piece. Not just a passing reference, but a named figure with traditions, rules, and consequences tied directly to pirate culture. According to Chapter 306, Nico Robin explains that Davy Jones was a legendary pirate cursed by a demon. Greedy beyond belief, he hoarded treasures and souls until he was condemned to live at the bottom of the sea, in a place known as Davy Jones's Locker. And in that underwater abyss, it said everything that sinks becomes his property. But here's where it gets interesting: the Davy backfight. The ridiculous-sounding pirate game Foxy introduced is actually based on this myth. It's not just a gag. In fact, the tradition dates back centuries, where pirate crews risked their own members in high-stakes contests. And to make sure no one cheated, they'd toss coins into the sea as a tribute, a payment to Davy Jones himself. Because if you cheated, well, it was said you'd be dragged straight into the locker. This ritual isn't folklore either. Chapter 1155 dropped a bombshell. Rocks D. Xebec was not described as a random tyrant, but as a Davy Jonesian pirate. Someone who didn't just admire the myth, but modeled his entire pirate ideology after it. Ruthless, greedy, and powerful, just like the cursed legend at the bottom of the sea. So the question is, why would Oda go out of his way to connect one of the most dangerous pirates in history to a supposedly fake ghost story? Something deeper is going on, and that leads us to the first theory. What if the mythical Joy Boy and the cursed Davy Jones are the same person? Sounds insane, right? But stick with this. Joy Boy is the mysterious figure from the Void Century, the one who left behind a message at Laugh-Tale, the one who once promised Fishman Island something he couldn't fulfill. But what if the reason he never fulfilled that promise is because he was cursed, trapped at the bottom of the sea, stripped of his freedom, turned into the legend we now know as Davy Jones? In Chapter 1155, when Rocks D. Xebec confronts Emu, he directly invokes the name of Davy Jones. And he doesn't say it as a joke. He says it like he's referencing an ancient enemy of the world government, and someone the Celestials are terrified of. That kind of name drop doesn't happen by accident. It feels like Oda is telling us Davy Jones was a legendary threat. Now think about this. The Davy backfight. A pirate-centered ritual could have originally been created by Joy Boy himself, a way to bring pirates together without war. And over time, that same tradition became twisted, corrupted by the very man who admired him, and it's Rocks D. Xebec. And here's where the Japanese language drops subtle hints. Raka, locker, sounds eerily close to raku, rock, the Japanese word that also ties to Rocks D. Xebec. Davy sounds just like the D in the names of Luffy, Roger, and Law. A clever play that might hint that Jones was the first D. So imagine this. Joy Boy, the first pirate to challenge the world government, was ultimately defeated but not killed, but erased and sealed away, cursed to live forever at the bottom of the ocean. Emu didn't just win, but also turned the rebel into a ghost story, hiding him under layers of myth so no one would ever dig up the truth. And it worked. But there's a catch. The symbol of Davy Jones still lingers in pirate games, in cursed seas, in whispered stories passed down through generations, almost like someone wanted to be remembered. But what if Davy Jones isn't Joy Boy but his opposite? That's where the next theory flips everything on its head. Here's a theory that turns the D clan upside down. What if the D doesn't stand for Dawn, Destiny, or even Devil, but actually stands for Davy, the Will of Davey? It sounds bold, maybe even ridiculous. But Chapter 1155 might have just planted that exact idea. When Rocks is described as a Davy Jonesian pirate, it's more than just a style of piracy. It's an ideology, an entire belief system shaped by one man's hunger, vengeance, and obsession with power. The very idea of using strength to overthrow kings? That's not Joy Boy's peaceful legacy, but something darker. So here's the split. Davy Jones is not Joy Boy. He's the antithesis of Joy Boy. Two ancient pirates with two conflicting ideals. Joy Boy represents freedom, laughter, and unity. Davy Jones represents vengeance, hoarding power, and punishing the world that betrayed him. And guess who follows which path? Luffy, Roger, Sol, and Law, all D's carriers who lean toward Joy Boy's will. Rocks and Blackbeard, ruthless, greedy, chaotic, follow the legacy of Davy Jones. This would mean that the D clan was never one unified lineage. Instead, it was a broken will, one passed down in fragments, split between light and dark, laughter and rage. Joy Boy's D was about liberation. Jones's D was about domination. And that explains Blackbeard perfectly. His yami yami no mi, a fruit of darkness and gravity, sucks in everything around it like a black hole, or a seafloor abyss. A perfect metaphor for Davy Jones's locker. Some fans even speculate that this was Davy's original fruit, and that Blackbeard inherited more than just his ambition. And here's that language twist again. The word Davy phonetically mirrors the D initial, suggesting that the entire Will of D might originate from Davy himself. And the word locker, it's not just a place. It could represent what the world government did to the D clan, locking away their truth during the Void Century. So now the question becomes, if Davy Jones is the root of the Will of D and Joy Boy and Blackbeard are its branches, what happened to the trunk? Who won? Well, we don't know that yet. But the next theory throws an even bigger wrench into everything. Because what if Davy Jones is still alive? You've heard the whispers. The man with the burn scar, the shadowy figure with a road poneglyph who travels the seas surrounded by whirlpools and might hold the key to the One Piece. Nobody knows his name, but what if it's been in front of us this whole time? What if Davy Jones is still alive, hiding in plain sight as the very man guarding the final piece of the puzzle? Let's break it down. The man with the burn scar is tied to whirlpool phenomena. Wherever he appears, whirlpools form, dragging ships down, obscuring movement, and keeping his secrets locked beneath the waves. That already sounds like someone cursed to dwell at the bottom of the sea, right? Now compare that to Davy Jones' locker, the mythic underwater domain where everything sinks and nothing escapes. In folklore, sailors said whirlpools were created by the devil dragging ships into the abyss. And in One Piece, that devil might just be Davy Jones. Some fans believe Jones was never killed, but instead imprisoned either by Imu, by ancient magic, or by a devil fruit curse. But instead of fading away, he adapted, changed his appearance, waited in the shadows, became the man with the burn scar. Not a victim, but a guardian of Void Century artifacts. There's even linguistic support here. In Japanese, hinokizu means burn scar, but hai also means fire. Fire and water are opposing elements in Japanese mythology, and that contrast might be symbolic of a duality inside Jones, a cursed water demon hiding a fiery past. Other fans think the scar isn't just literal, but metaphorical. A burn left by betrayal, by war, by the world government's lies. And if anyone had a reason to carry those wounds, it's the man who fought back during the Void Century and lost. There are even posts online suggesting that Jones was involved with O'Hara, or even sailed with Roger. Think about that for a second. The most ancient man in the world drifting through history, protecting the truth the world government wants buried. It makes sense. It's terrifying. But if Jones is alive, hiding in the modern world, what else is he hiding? And that leads us to a theory that'll make you rethink the entire treasure hunt. We've heard it all that the One Piece is a weapon, a message, a treasure, even a joke. But what if it's exactly where you'd never think to look? What if the One Piece is sitting at the very bottom of the sea? In Davy Jones' locker, guarded by the ghost, the curse, or even the corpse of the first pirate? This theory starts with Pirate Island, Hachinosu, the supposed birthplace of Davy Jones' legend. In chapter 306, we're introduced to this lawless island shaped like a whale, with coins thrown into the ocean during the Davy back fight. It's a pirate tradition offering payment to the gatekeeper of a forbidden place. And that's what the locker is, a vault of lost things. Ships, lives, treasures, and maybe the One Piece itself. In SBS Volume 38, Oda describes Davy Jones as a greedy pirate who hoarded all he could, fitting perfectly with the idea that the One Piece is not a symbolic reward, but literally the greatest hoard of treasure ever assembled, sealed away by the first man who ever touched it. Now picture this. Roger and his crew arrive at Laugh-Tale, find the treasure, and just start laughing. Not because it's a joke, but because they realize the final reward is buried at sea, locked in a myth, protected by someone everyone forgot. A cruel twist on a classic story. You wanted freedom? You get a curse. And here's the linguistic twist. The word takara means treasure. Pair that with raka, locker, and you get treasure in the locker. Add in hachinosu, which can phonetically resemble hashi-no-su or edge's nest, and suddenly the whale-shaped island becomes a literal marker for the edge of the world, pointing down into the abyss. Even the whale imagery connects. Remember Jonah from the Bible? Swallowed by a whale, trapped in darkness, then spat back out. That's Davy Jones's entire myth in a nutshell. And maybe it's Luffy's future too. But not all clues point to myth and mystery. Some are hiding in plain sight, like the eerie similarities between Davy Jones and Vanderin. If Davy Jones is just a myth, then why does Vanderin exist? Think about it. A pirate who sails a ghost ship, obsessed with an ancient weapon, cursed with a power that lets him mark anything and target it from anywhere. It's not a coincidence, is it? Because it's suspiciously specific. Vanderin 9, the creepy fishman from Fishman Island, captains the Flying Dutchman, a name borrowed directly from real-world maritime legends. And in those legends, the Flying Dutchman and Davy Jones are often intertwined. Cursed sailors who can't die, doomed to drift forever beneath the sea. Now in One Piece, they're separate, but are they really? Vanderin's obsession with Shirahoshi, or Poseidon, one of the ancient weapons, mirrors the kind of ambition we'd expect from a man tied to the Void Century. He's not just some deranged stalker, but might be following a script written long ago. Here's what fans are theorizing online. Davy Jones may be an ancestor of the Deccan bloodline, cursed generations ago with powers that warped over time. Deccan's devil fruit, the Mato Mato no Mi, lets him mark people and objects, like claiming ownership over them. That's eerily close to Davy Jones's myth, owning everything that sinks into the sea. His cruise ship appears out of nowhere, like a ghost from the abyss, shrouded in mist, dragging souls into legend. There's even linguistic overlap. Deccan in Japanese sounds like Debbie, Davy, again tying back to the D initial. And Jones is called a sea devil, Umi no Akuma. Deccan, a fishman pirate with sea-based abilities, living in the very depths Davy Jones is said to haunt. So is Deccan a descendant, or maybe a reminder? A living warning that Jones' curse is still active, still spreading, and still dragging people toward the locker. So now we've got ancient pirates, cursed bloodlines, sunken treasure, and secret guardians. But before we wrap this up, we need to talk about how all of this blew up online. It's not just a headcanon anymore. The theory that Davy Jones is more than just a myth is spreading like wildfire across fan circles, especially after Chapter 1155 dropped that Davy Jonesian bomb. On X, fans have been dissecting every panel, every name drop, every whirlpool, and the conclusions, they range from genius to terrifying. A well-known One Piece analyst pointed out that Robin's explanation of Davy Jones back in Chapter 306 was not random exposition but might have been an early seed, a quiet setup for something Oda planned to revisit hundreds of chapters later. That's peak Oda foreshadowing. Meanwhile, another person dropped a theory that had everyone talking. Davy Jones is the man with the burn scar. It all fits. The whirlpools, the isolation, the Void Century silence. He's not dead, but just waiting. Another person who took it even further. They believe Davy Jones is a guardian and a survivor of the Void Century, someone who fought with Joy Boy, maybe even against him. Their post suggests Jones is Hinokizu himself, wielding some kind of sea-based or sea stone-related power that lets him control the ocean and guard the poneglyphs. And let's not forget another theorist who posted something that broke the internet. What if Rock's D Xebec challenged Imu to a Davy backfight? What if the entire idea of risking crew members was weaponized into a war tactic? A pirate game against the gods? Wild, right? But it makes sense if you believe Rox was the inheritor of Jones' will, not Joy Boy's. Even crazier that someone theorized that Jones is tied to Imu's demonic entourage, suggesting a cosmic duality. Joy Boy as a sun god, and Jones as a fallen sea devil. And just yesterday, someone posted a killer observation. Hachinosu's mountain, the one shaped like a whale, might be a nod to the biblical story of Jonah, a man swallowed by a beast of the sea and trapped inside. Sound familiar? Yeah, that's Davy Jones's locker, hiding in plain sight. These aren't just random posts, they're part of a larger pattern. The fandom is picking up on something Oda's been quietly building for years. And if the theories are right, we haven't seen the last of Davy Jones. One Piece is a story built on puns, double meanings, and names that mean more than they seem. And when it comes to Davy Jones, the Japanese language might have been giving us clues all along. Let's start with the obvious. Debi Janzu. The katakana spelling of Davy Jones does more than localize a Western myth. It drops a huge hint. The first syllable, Debi, sounds almost exactly like the letter D. Coincidence? Not in Oda's world, especially since Chapter 1155 introduces the term Davy Jonesian, or in Japanese, Debi Jonsushugi, framing Davy Jones not just as a person, but an ideology, one that contrasts Nika's joyful freedom with raw, greedy domination. Raka, locker. At first glance, it just means locker. a sealed container, but phonetically it mirrors Raku, the word for rock. You know, as in rocks Xebec. If Davy Jones's locker is the place where all lost things go and Rocks is the pirate most obsessed with domination, it's possible the locker isn't just a place. It could be a metaphor for hiding truth, sealing history, or imprisoning ideas. Maybe even Joy Boy's legacy itself. Hachinosu, beehive, the name of Pirate Island. But linguistically, it sounds a lot like Hashi no Su, which means nest at the edge. That doesn't just describe the island's geography, it's a poetic description of the edge of the world, or even the seafloor. Could it be a hint that Hachinosu is sitting on top of Davy Jones's locker? Umi no Akuma, sea devil. In chapter 306, Davy Jones is referred to as a cursed pirate touched by a demon. The term sea devil comes up again in Japanese lore, but in One Piece there's a contrast between this and the idea of Umi no Kami, sea god, which is what Nika represents. That's where things get deep. Nika equals freedom, light, joy. Davy Jones, curse, depth, confinement. One is the sun, the other is the abyss. It's a duality, and the Japanese wordplay draws that line cleanly. Takara, treasure. One Piece, the greatest treasure in the world. But the word Takara paired with Raka makes for a pretty eerie implication. The treasure isn't in the sky or on some island, it's locked away. Literally, treasure in the locker. So yeah, when you zoom out, this isn't just clever naming. It's a linguistic roadmap, leading us from a Western myth straight into the heart of One Piece's deepest secrets.